I recently came across this unfortunate looking Power Mac 9600. In a lot of ways, this was the last great gasp of 90s Apple before Steve Jobs came back and ruined everything with, success. This thing was so powerful and so expandable that Apple kept on selling it well after it was replaced by the original Power Mac G3. So today, let's show this neglected example a little bit of love, make sure it's fully working, and talk a little bit about what makes this thing so darn special. And I have some really big plans for upgrading the ever-loving bejeezus out of this thing. So stay tuned. And if you enjoy nurturing the iconic computers of yesteryear and then dragging them kicking and screaming into the modern day, I hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel. The Power Macintosh 9600. Released in the middle of 1997, it was an uncompromising Macintosh. It was the last of the pre-G3 Power Macs and had a 604E processor in multiple fun configurations, from 200 MHz to 350 MHz, and a super cool dual 200 model. The original was based on the Tsunami architecture, and partway through 1997, they upgraded it to the Kansas architecture, which was basically the same thing with a couple enhancements like L2 cache. It has 6 PCI slots, the very last Power Mac to have that, and could house an absolutely ridiculous 1.5 gigs of RAM. And the CPU was housed on a daughter card, making for easy upgrades from aftermarket manufacturers. For these reasons and more, Apple kept selling this ultra expandable machine well into the Power Mac G3's reign for power users who needed all that extra expandability. And I've been looking for one of these things for a while, and just in time for Macintosh, I ran across this kind of dingy one. But I see glory beneath the the grime and scuffs and bent case and cracked plastics. And I'm pretty sure the board in there is fully working, although it didn't come with a hard drive, so we're gonna have to test that out. So let's spruce this thing up a little, open it up, see what's inside, and if this thing is working, I have some really big upgrades I want to toss in there to potentially make it the world's most powerful 90s beige Power Mac. Right after this word about today's sponsor, PCBWay. It's really amazing the things we can do these days with professional PCB fabrication houses like PCBWay, where you can upload your PCB designs and get high quality manufacturing in pretty much any quantity, from just a few to a huge run. And not only that, PCBWay also now offers assembly, even component sourcing. Need to design a case for your project? PCBWay has you covered there too, with high quality 3D printing and even injection molding and CNC machining. So if you have any PCB prototyping or production needs, I hope you'll give PCBWay.com a try. First thing I'm gonna do is clean this thing up and see if I can figure out why some of these panel pieces don't quite fit together right. I feel like the case is bent or something. But yeah, let's have a quick cleanup montage. Okay, so I think I made a lot of progress here. It's not perfect, but I cleaned most of the grime off, and I even got the parts to fit together much more nicely, although it turns out there's a little bit of plastic missing on this top piece here. So it's, well, it's not perfect, but it's okay for me. Now, before we actually power this thing on and test it out, we're gonna need to add some stuff. It doesn't have a hard drive, and I'm gonna try it out with this Western Digital 4GB SCSI drive with macOS 9.2 for old world Macs on here. At least I think that's what's on here. And then we need a video card because this thing does not have built-in video. Even though there is a blank on the back for it, the motherboard doesn't have it. So this is a Rage 128 out of, I think, a blue and white G3, so it should work, although it's not in the best condition. I'm pretty sure it works. Yeah, not only is this Mac super upgradable, but it's extremely convenient to work on. The whole side just comes off here, although ours is, well, I think the case is a bit bent, but that's fine. And then the party trick, the whole top rotates out, giving us full access to the motherboard in this otherwise behemoth of a case. And just look at this glorious motherboard. 12 slots for memory. 604E processor on a convenient daughter card. And our 6 PCI slots, of which one of them is going to need to be our video card. And we'll just hook up a hard drive here. And we'll shove it on in there. Perfect. Now, we're going to need a monitor as beefy and impressive as this thing is. Yeah. Oh my god. It's so pretty. Everything's plugged in. Hard drive is in. Video card is in. Let's power this on. No chime. All right, through the cunning use of plugging the processor card all the way in, it works now, and it's booting up. All right, let's see what the memory situation is like in here. 256 megs of RAM. Okay, so I think we actually have two 128 meg sticks in here, which means we only need 10 more. And just for context, I've gathered up 1.5 gigs of 128 meg RAM sticks here. That's almost 1.5 pounds of memory. And since these two existing sticks in here are 128 megs, which I did not expect, we just have to populate the rest of these. All right, and then for the last two, I have these gargantuan sticks, which are actually just 128 meg sticks. They're four 32 meg sticks stacked on top of one another. These came in one of my Macintosh clones. Very weird, but they do work. Though actually I'm a little concerned they're not going to fit in this case. No, too tall. Oh man, we're one short. All right, dug another stick out of the old UMac Super Mac, which fortunately takes the same memory. Oh, look at that. Look how much memory that is. That's ridiculous. And while we're at it, I've taken out the hard drive and put the disk image on this 64 gig SD card so we can use it with the all new Blue SCSI V2 for desktop, which is also powered by the Raspberry Pi Pico, which is super cool. And I think what I want to do with this is somehow mount it so I can access the SD card from the front here, which is a little bit of a problem because the designer of the 9600-300 case didn't think to make a cutout to fit an SD card. I wonder why. So what I decided to do was spend way too much time looking at the bezel that's supposed to go over here, this blank here, and recreating it in a 3D print. Yeah, I did this with a tape measure in millimeters and a ton of trial and error, and it's still not quite right, but it's good enough. And with this, I can design a mount to stick the SD card from the Blue SCSI out the front of this thing and have it nicely mounted inside, easily accessible and looking pretty good. And thanks to Joe of Joe's Computer Museum, I actually do have a filament that matches this beige, kind of yellow beige, much better than this white filament does. But yeah, this thing is curved to pretty much precisely match the curve of the machine. And I'm really excited about it. So I'll put up a link to this STL file when I tweak it just a little bit more, in case you need a bezel for your 9600 case or cases that are compatible, like I think the beige G3 case. And then I'll also use this as the baseline to make mounts for Blue SCSI V2, and I'll probably also make one to fit the Zulu SCSI, since I know a lot of you probably have these. And yeah, the SD card is in a slightly different position. So yeah, for my machine, I definitely want to use Blue SCSI. That's my preference. But yeah, everyone's welcome here, regardless of SCSI preference. But for now, we'll do the tried and true dangle out the front method. All right, moment of truth. How much memory do we have? 1.5 gigs. That's a comical amount of memory in a beige Power Mac. Running off of our SD card. That's pretty sweet. We can do so much with this machine. And there's tons of cool stuff we can do with Blue SCSI V2. Right now, of course, I'm booting a 20 gigabyte hard drive image. And I've also loaded a CD image for my favorite classic Mac game, Elite Force. But there's much more, much more. And yeah, definitely worth doing a video specifically on Blue SCSI V2 in the future. But for now, I'll link to a video from Joe's Computer Museum where he goes over some of the incredibly cool features. Honestly, you're going to be shocked when you see some of the stuff that Blue SCSI V2 can actually do, both in vintage Macs and in just vintage SCSI machines in general. All right, so this is already quite a ridiculously upgraded machine with 1.5 gigs of RAM in a machine from 1997. That's wild. But we've only scratched the surface of this ridiculous Macintosh build, because I have a bunch more stuff that I want to stick in here, including a gift from your friend and mine in Japan, Kei Koba, who sent me a kit to get this thing running on a modern ATX power supply. And I think we're going to need that extra power and reliability, because 300 megahertz is pretty okay for 1997, but I wonder if we can turn those megahertz into gigahertz and get this thing booting off of something even faster than an SD card, like, say, a SATA controller card. But you'll have to stick around and make sure you're subscribed, because that'll be next time. For now, I'm going to call this video here. If you enjoyed it, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more Macintosh shenanigans like this, please subscribe down below. And thank you very much for watching. And a special thanks to Alex Hoffman, Camilo Noceda, Chris Allegretta, Chris Biggs, Chris Calderon, Chris Nelson, Control-Alt-Reese, Daniel Hubbard, Greg from Hrutke Mods, Justin Hemmings, Justin Reed, Megahertz Models, Michael Mulhern, Paul Spencer, Ryan, Scott Thompson, Sutek, Tom Woodfin, and Unknown Soldier 41, who are my highest tiered patrons and all of my Patreon supporters who help to make these videos possible.